I have been using a payday routine for over 15 years. Let's talk about it. Hi, and welcome back. This is Guy, and I want to talk about my payday routine. This is something I do every time I get paid to make sure I stay on track to my goal to retirement, and not just retiring, but retiring early. If you watched my previous video, I discussed what got me on the journey to wanting to retire early, because there are three things I know for sure. One, I'm not going to live forever. Two, I don't plan on working forever. And three, you got to wear your sunscreen. All things I learned pretty early on. So let's go over my payday routine. Now, this has evolved over time. What it was in the beginning is not what it is now. And this has pretty much been catered to how I want my money to be saved and all the different categories that they go into. But one of the biggest things, and this is paramount, you have to automate. What automation does is sends your money into different locations or schedules your primary bills to be paid without you having to think about it. Now, my automation schedule is not, well, let me show you. So this is my automation schedule. Before my money ever makes it to me, roughly 50% of it is gone. And that money goes into my employer-based health insurance, maxing out my 403B, or depending on the industry you're in, 401k. And because I'm maxing out, I am also getting my employer match. Third, any other employer provided incentive, such as life insurance, and of course, then paying my taxes. The other 50% goes into 7 different accounts at 5 different banks. And let me just give you a little overview of how that works. I have 2 accounts, a checking and a savings account that goes into my joint accounts. So my joint accounts is what myself and my husband use to pay our bills or our daily living expenses. I have another account that I call my day one account. This is an account that I've had since I was in college. Therefore, I still have some policies or just small things that are attached to that account. So I've always kept that. And I also use that just to establish my financial history. I have an account that I call No Link. What is my No Link account? That is an account that I keep a small amount of money on so that if I'm making one-off online purchases or I'm ordering from websites I've never ordered before, I will use that account to limit my exposure to fraud. Because if you use an account, if you use a website one time and you never plan to go back, your information is sitting on those websites. So it is just trying to decrease my exposure to fraud and scams. I have an account called Others, and that is a checking and it's a checking and a high yield checking account at a minority owned bank. The reason I do this is because minorities have historically had a difficult time obtaining loans, or when they do obtain loans, they're either at a much higher rate or they may not be as large as some of our counterparts. Therefore, I make sure to put money into that account to ensure that when individuals who bank at these locations or bank at these institutions, that there is money available for the bank to give them loans. The rest of the money goes into an account I call the dump, but primarily that would be what most people would call their primary account. The order in which I have these going into the different banks plays a role as well. I have my dump account listed last, meaning everything goes where they need to go as a designated amount. The dump will be anything remaining. So if there's an order preference, you need to make sure that you are establishing that with your employer for your direct deposits. Now, there is another sum of money I have not accounted for. I occasionally get bonuses, and because a bonus structure can be discontinued at any time, I do not count bonus money as real money. meaning whenever I get a bonus, that money circles back over into my others account, which that money is sitting there to be used by the bank to provide loans to individuals who may have who bank at those institutions. My automation is not done yet, y'all. Next, my dump account. This is what that covers. It covers my mortgage. Now, again, if you play back, you notice that I said I have a joint account that covers my regular everyday bills, being a part of a married, well, for my husband and myself. Well, there is a second home that still has a mortgage on it, but it is also renter occupied. So even though it is renter occupied and there is money coming in essentially to cover that, I also keep an emergency fund for that home, meaning if something happens, the renter isn't paying the rent, or I need to evict them, or something catastrophic happened, there's already money set aside to take care of that home. Next, my cell phone is paid out of the dump. And even that, my cell phone is partially reimbursed by my job. So it's a very small amount. My credit cards come out of this account. And I should say credit card. I only have one credit card. And this one credit card I use just like I would cash. Meaning, if I don't have cash to pay for it, it does not go on the credit card. This again goes back to one, limiting my exposure to fraud by only using one credit card. And also it helps me better control my spending because again, this card is paid off in full every month. So there is no rolling over of expenses or purchasing something that I can roll over and extend to several months. If that's the case, if I cannot pay for it right then and there, it's not purchased. Well, technically, if I can't pay for it in a few weeks, it's not purchased. I then use some of that money as well for my investing, my brokerage accounts, and even that is automated with money being sent directly or linking my bank to those accounts. So those funds will go directly over with me having to push a button. And excess money or anything left in that account then goes to my savings. Regular savings, I have high yield savings accounts, and the purchase of CDs. I have multiple CDs at multiple banks. It's another way to have money available, but still making a higher interest rate than your regular banker's bank account or savings account, which typically give you 0.0, well, gives you about 0.1% interest, where with a CD, you can range, depending on how long you've had it for and what the interest rate at the time, can be somewhere about 5% or below. That is just my automation. Let's now get into how my money is actually spent. Okay. I have categorized how I distribute my money into 3 categories: surviving, planning, and growing. So surviving is going to be your everyday living expenses, paying your bills, your house or your rent or mortgage, utilities and insurance, and food and groceries. Also, you want to fund your emergency fund, and typical amount is 3 to 6 months of 3 to 6 months worth of your surviving expenses or your living expenses. The way the economy is going, the way jobs are in flux right now, even if you feel like you have a secure job, you may not know if your employer may have a mass layoff or something like that. And then it then becomes hard to find a job because the market may be flooded. Third would be paying down any debt that you have. Now, on the joint living side, we have one credit card that we use exactly the same way as I stated. On the singular side, I have that credit card. This credit card is paid off in full every month, meaning if we don't have the money to pay for it, then it should not be purchased. Now, granted, things like auto repair or something that might be a larger expense. Even though it's larger, it is still something we end up paying off because that's why we have our emergency fund. Now, into my planning category. My planning category is going to be things that assist in planning for my retirement. So this is going to be maxing out my 403B. That is done before this money ever touched my hand. And making sure you get any employer match by contributing enough to qualify, which is what we do. Third is going to be growing or investing. So this is where I categorize my brokerage accounts. And I have index funds as well as some individual stocks that I have in my holdings that I will purchase monthly. The index funds are automated, meaning that money is automatically transferred into those accounts. And then there are a small group of index funds that I purchase every month. As for the individual holdings, those I will go in, look and see how the market is doing and decide which ones I'm going to purchase additional stock in. I get paid every 2 weeks. And so this process repeats every 2 weeks and has been ongoing for years. So anything you can do to help decrease time involved in making sure your money is working for you, as well as to provide yourself with a plan. You have to know how much money you have in order to know what to designate it. And by having a payday plan, it helps you be more aware of where your money is going and what you're spending your money on. A big part of that is also establishing a good budget. And that's something I'll go over in another video on how I establish or how we establish our budget as a married couple. The goal with your money is to not be afraid of your money. I do know there are people that if you don't have a lot of money or you've just not really thought about how your money is working for you, that payday is actually dreadful for them because they know as soon as they get the money is leaving your hand. We would all love to get to a point where we are so comfortable with our financial security that we don't even think about payday. We even forget that we were even paid. And that is the goal I wish for all of you. But thank you for spending some time with me going over my payday routine. Hopefully something I said either inspired you, made you think about how you're distributing your money in a different way, or even gave you some tips, again, of something you may not have thought about. And remember, limit your exposure to fraud.